Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I was getting so excited just really looking at all the commentary of those who are in the room with us today. You just saw the message that it is being recorded. Of course, we would love to see your camera ready faces, but if you're more comfortable, feel free to go ahead and stop your camera. Just know as we go along the way there, we are going to have some opportunities where we're going to be asking you to put some information in the chat, and we may certainly ask some of you to come off mute and share out a little bit because this is really going to be a great learning experience for all of us. So I'm already going off script. So, oh, well, there you have it. Um, I was just looking at the people who are on with us today. Mary Pre-K Champagne. I went to school at the University of Illinois, so very familiar with that area. In fact, was just down there last weekend. My daughter is attending U of I in the third year of her doctoral program. So was just stomping around my old campus last weekend. Lisa is a kindergarten teacher. Just looking at all of this preschool for all blended. So here I am going off script. Jane, I hope I'm saying that right. Jana, would you either in the chat or come off mute? Are you do you have community-based programs? I'm just trying to really gauge if we have any community-based partners on with us tonight. And while she is doing that, we have a school psychologist. Yes, I really, a lot of RTI when it was first born, a lot of this work set in the portfolio of school psychologists. And so, as we're going to be talking about the shift in the paradigm, not only the shift in the language, but the paradigm shift in the thinking, it's so important that we have our related services personnel on with us. I thought I saw someone else that said they were speech and language on here as I was looking. If I'm going to go up just a little bit. Yes, Deb. Deb is district preschool speech language therapist. All my special ed folks, woohoo, special ed in the house, special ed teacher, Illinois, special ed co-op. That's Christine. And Christine, if you wouldn't mind sharing or coming off mute and letting us know, what grade levels you serve within your special ed co-op?
It's pre-K, so they're 3, 4, and 5-year-olds.
Okay, and is that the same for Tina Butterbroad, Special Education Administrator? Because I see you put pre-K to post high school, so that's a very large span. You've got your undergrad and early childhood, but that Livingston County Special Ed Co-op with 11 districts. So you corral a lot of cats, Tina. What grade levels are you currently the administrator over?
So currently for this school year, I am in a pre-K 1 building 1 day a week, and then I'm in a pre-K pre-K 3 building a day and a half. I'm in a high school half a day, and then I'm in a pre-K / 4th through junior high building 1 day a week.
Okay, Tina,
Welcome
welcome.
Welcome to rural Illinois, and Jana is one of our member district programs.
Okay, so I did say that right. First of all, thank you so much, and welcome. So now this is going to kind of segue into why you're going to see myself as well as the Illinois MTSS network throughout this entire series. It's literally because of what you just said. We want everyone in our state to know, as we're talking about these practices, we really want practices. We want to see continuity of care and consistency of practices for students, as well as language that we're speaking when it comes to our colleagues. So that means educators, our preschool for all expansion educators, as children transition into kindergarten, and we're sending off the information about how our children learn best, what practices that we had in place for them, so that we don't lose children and families sometimes in between that transition from pre-K to K. But also we know that transitions are really ongoing. Children just don't transition from pre-K to K, or school age, as we like to say. They transition up from K to 1 and 1 and 2 and so on and so forth. And so the Illinois MTSS network, along with ECPL, have really been working hard to look at developmentally appropriate practices, but also do it and explain it in ways that at the grade level, people are able to hear, receive, and understand. So this, I'm really excited to have you on with us today. We're going to be asking you to suspend a little bit of what you might be thinking about when it comes to MTSS as we go on, but we're not going to leave you hanging when we do that. We're going to actually, you may have to suspend some of your thought patterns, but we will come in right away with, so here's what you can replace that with. And then before I go on, I want to say, Lily Jimenez, pre-K to 5 multilingual coordinator. We got an app for that. Literally, we have an app for that, so to speak, that is going to help you see how we're incorporating our students who are multilingual learners when it comes to an MTSS framework. Did I miss anybody, Lori, as far as what was in the chat?
I think Kirsten, sorry. No, it is Kristen, sorry. Teaches at Riley Early Childhood and Harvey. She just jumped on, so.
Hey, Kristen, I am familiar with your former principal. So yes, welcome, welcome, welcome. Melissa Martin as well, special ed teacher Mokina. And okay, you're just gonna have to come right on off mute and help us, help me pronounce your name. Neema, well, pre-K administrator in the Sycamore District.
It's Neve. No worries. It's
Say it
Neve. Yeah.
again.
You're good.
Neem.
Neve. Yep.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Make sure you're in the right place at the right time. Early childhood education and care to kindergarten, developmentally appropriate multi-tiered system of supports. As you saw, when you were looking in the ECPL, you may have seen that this is a series. One thing I want to tell you, we're going to talk about the dates coming up. We don't want anyone to feel like, oh my gosh, I can't make the rest of the dates. We built this series so that you can a la carte, like when you go to a smorgasbord, or if you're able to join us for the whole series, of course, we would love to have you, but we did build it in such a way so that you can enjoy it and benefit from it a la carte. Why did we do that? Because we really realized that trying to put all of the tenets of true, authentic, multi-tiered system of supports in a 1 hour or even 2 hour professional learning experience, especially at the end of the day, right? When we're trying to decompress from our day and then stay focused on learning our own professional learning, it's a disservice to everyone involved. It's a disservice to educators. It's a disservice to the children that you serve. It's a disservice to families. So what we've done is we've broken the information up in such a way where we'll be able to share it with you, be able to press pause, allow you to ask us questions, seek and share wisdom from each other. So tonight, we're really focusing on defining, developing, and refining. So why those three things? Some of us may be at the point where it's like, yeah, I just need it defined for me. Some of us, we've been working on it a little bit. We're developing. We're not quite there yet, but we're developing. And some of us, as it is with education, that's what continuous quality improvement plans are all about. We're constantly reviewing where we are and seeing, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it is something that needs a little bit of polishing, we refine. So tonight, we're really going to be spending time just kind of getting our foundational conversation about MTSS started. And as Karen said, this is actually being sponsored by Early Childhood Professional Learning. They're facilitating this. That's why you saw it on their website. And I believe that Illinois MTSS Network is sharing it on their website too. But they are the facilitator of this. In fact, Early Childhood Professional Learning, their grant deliverables actually includes MTSS for our early childhood community. And it also includes transitions, hence pulling in the Illinois MTSS network so that we can make sure that, again, as we're transitioning children from programs, community-based, Head Start, district programs into kindergarten, we have shared language that is not confusing anyone. So that's our goal. And then, as we've already said, this is in collaboration with the Illinois MTSS network. Here is me. I guess I've been talking enough. I should let people like, who is this woman anyway? That's me. A little bit of information about myself and work that I'm doing across the state and across the nation. I've been an RTI, scoper outer, so to speak, way since it was written into the law, No Child Left Behind. I am very, very passionate about this evidence-based practice and subject matter because I've seen what happens for educators and children when it's really authentically implemented. So very, very passionate about that work. And I think it connects everything. It really multi-tiered system of supports puts the system in the multiple tiered supports of evidence-based practices that we are called upon as educators to implement every day. And already, Lori, I jumped ahead to our second seminar, which is in November, but there you have it. And then I'll let Lori tell a little bit about herself. There she is, the lovely Lori.
Well, thanks. I am glad to be here. Glad to see so many people are here. You can see a little bit about me there. And I've been involved in this work for a long time. If you were around earlier and knew anything about Illinois Aspire, which was a K-3 initiative around literacy, and then Illinois RTI network. And then as we've kind of matured and graduated to a multi-tiered system of supports concept now in the network here, those were 3 iterations of the SPDIG grant here in Illinois. So you don't really care about that so much, but it just was a good opportunity for us to sort of be the guinea pigs to try this out with many schools. And we did learn a lot of things. I'll be sharing some of that today. So right now we're housed at Northern Illinois University. So I have to say, go Huskies, and wear my red. So thanks, Antoinette.
You're welcome. And I just want to say, Lori and I have just had an opportunity for many years through all these iterations. We've just kind of locked arms and said, we don't care what they call it. We don't care what the iteration is. We're going to hang tough with this no matter what it takes. So we've had the pleasure of working together, presenting in physical spaces, dealing with the pandemic. Oh my goodness, keeping the work going. So we're just very, very pleased and excited to have this opportunity to really do this series with everyone. We are going to go straight through everyone. We're going to go straight through to 5:30. So we want to be self-attuned to your needs. If you need to get up, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, especially in these evening hours, please feel free to do that. Look, I've got my water bottle right here. Just see that, right? So if you need to get your water bottle, your tea, your coffee, feel free to go ahead and do that. Keep your sound up so that you can hear us. And then when you come back, just jump right on in. And we are practicing grammar, Grace. We are educators, so we already dot every I and cross every T. But when you're brainstorming in the chat, this is a safe space. Do not worry about, did I spell that right? Was that semicolon in the right place? We just want to hear your ideas. We want everyone to be able to learn from each other. We're blessed to facilitate our time together, but we will be learning from each other, not only tonight, but if you'll be joining us as we move forward, we'll all be continuing to learn from each other. So please, that is a way of letting you know We are not taking out our magnifying glasses to see if every little thing is right. Please join us in the chat whenever we have the opportunity to do so. And in case you have a thought or a question, and we're not at that, obligatory, let's press pause in our presentation and see what the folks have to say. Jump right in the chat anyway. We will be monitoring the chat as we go along. If you have a question, like it's a burning question, I can't wait for them to tell me, raise my hand. Go ahead and throw your hands up and we'll be sure to make sure that we address any concerns, comments, thoughts that you have today. And here we go. Briefly share your purpose for joining the conversation today. Go ahead and put that in the chat. Okay, Joy wants to deepen their understanding and practice with the MTSS process. And that is going to happen tonight for sure. Wants to get updated. Sandra, yes, about MTSS. Kristen, learn more about MTSS. Mary, we're just now #BFFs on Facebook. I've heard MTSS, but I don't really know what it is. I really enjoy the candid response of like, I don't even know enough to know what I don't know. I hear it out there, but not really sure exactly what it is. And if we don't know what it is, how can we truly implement it? Lisa just started MTS at our school, and I would like to understand it better, looking for new ideas. So some of you that are saying, looking for new ideas might be in that developing and refining stage, right? And we're actually going to parse out for you what these implementation stages look like so that we can really see, oh, where are we at on this journey versus going to eval right away. Hold your hat right there, because we're gonna talk about that a little bit. Learning about MTSS, find and learn ways to help support PFA program, support students to the best of your best possibility. And we know that every seed, whether it's a flower, whether it's a tree, whether it's a blade of grass, it starts from the seed that we plant in the ground, and that is our youngest learners. So Illinois, you'll find as we talk about this, has been really purposeful about including early learners in what was first the RTI process and now the MTSS process. So we're really hoping that you'll be able to see what this looks like from the ground up. Hey, Miss Manisha, how are you? Head Start, okay, community-based programs. What I really all of us, I want us to glean from our time together. Multi-tiered system of supports /RTI. When it was RTI, I love the way Lori said, as we've graduated, because I like to say we kind of growing up, right? Was so specific about academics and then that social emotional. The truth is we have many evidence-based requirements that are placed on us every single day. We have funding streams that have requirements for us. We have frameworks that have requirements for us. There's, the CASEL framework for social emotional development. There's the NCPMI framework or the pyramid model framework. There is ECHRS 3. There is CLASS. There is NWEA. There's the kids. What do we do with all of this information, and how do we sustain our practices? And I submit to you today, that's multi-tiered system. The operative word there is system of supports. And then Deb, just as I finish us out, I don't have an understanding of who should get IEPs and who should go through MTSS first in my blended preschool. Okay. Thank you all for sharing. We're going to get started, all right? Here's our objective. This is just an overview of a discussion of defining multi-tiered system of supports from a variety of learning environments. Okay? Here's why. And many of you said it in your comments. I'm looking for a greater understanding so that I have an increased capacity to recognize the support learners. And notice here, we have teachers. Multi-tiered system of support is not boxed in for students only. It really is about the whole child and the whole school. Who is our whole school? Our whole school includes our educators, our related services personnel, our para-educators, paraprofessionals, classroom teachers. It includes whole community, who are our families. How do we bridge in our community? Our goal is to recognize, respond, monitor, and document what the support learners need and teachers need, and how to be successful and sustain high quality practices. Okay, so let's just jump in. What's the best way to do that? Look at defining, look at developing, look at refining. If you would go in the chat, and which one of these best speaks to you? Just put that word right in there. When it comes to the MTSS implementation spectrum. Now, as you're choosing where you are and putting yourself in the chat and putting that in the chat, going to share a couple of things. It is possible to be in more than one stage of the spectrum at one time. It's very, very possible that you could be at exploration and installation because remember, you're looking at everything. MTSS really requires us to look at all of our practices, looking at all of our data. So you could be at exploration in one area and installation in another. So there's that overlapping, just like our domains of development. Children are not stacked, right? Domains of development are not like the language arts is here, math is here. It's very permeable. And so just as it is with domains of development and content understanding when it comes to students, it is the same way with MTSS. So let's just kind of see what everyone said here. Ooh, okay, that data collection and analysis. Don't know enough to know what I don't know. Couple people are saying that. Data collection and restart implementation on our early grades. I love that openness there to say, yeah, we need to kind of take some steps back. And the truth is, sometimes when we look at our data and we analyze it, if we listen to our data from a positive perspective, sometimes our data says, oh, you know what? We need to go back and look at this area. For instance, sometimes you may think you have, let's just talk about attendance, right? We may say, we have great attendance here, but then when you disaggregate your data and you look at it, you may have a chronic absenteeism problem in kindergarten. And then when you disaggregate your data a little bit more, that could be leading to social, emotional, or challenging behavior. It could lead to why you're reading. Your children may not be reading at or above grade level as you would prefer. Those data conversations are often the things that drive us back to looking at our implementation spectrum of MTSS as well as our practices. So I really I'm happy to see that we're not looking at data as that bad four-letter word. And then I saw something else in here. Okay, so Sandra has literally starting all over again. One district was pretty advanced, and then now you're working at one that's at the very initial stages of MTSS. I agree, Lori. Very, very interesting place to be. So let's just get a little bit of background information of where it started. And for my special ed folks that are on with us, if you start hearing some things that may be different from how your district has been operating, just hold on, okay? So how did this all start? Well, it started with the No Child Left Behind Act. You know, in education, we're not happy unless we are doing some type of acronym. So No Child Left Behind was also known as NICLV. And this is what's written in the law, was written in the law of No Child Left Behind. By the start of the 2010-2011 school year, which was literally meant July 1, 2010, every district that was receiving public funds needed to be able to do this. That is a direct quote from the law, No Child Left Behind. Have a process that determines how a child responds. That great big fancy phrase, scientific research-based interventions. Now, I would say if you got a piece of paper and a pencil with you, write down the word interventions. Because we're going to talk about culprits a little bit later on, and that specific letter of the law word was one of them. Okay? As part of the evaluation procedure, write down the word evaluation. Okay? Those two words kind of start sending us in a bit of a flux. Must permit the use of scientific research-based interventions, right? Must document how the student responds. Must document. Write down the word does not achieve. Does not achieve adequately or make sufficient progress. So right there, the entire practice became, instead of being asset-based, was deficit-based. Because in the minds of a lot of people, it was about intervening because children were not progressing and they were not achieving adequately. Okay? Someone coming off mute got a question there? Okay. It also happens that the tenets of RTI are within the Individuals with Disability Education Act. RTI is a multi-tiered approach to providing instruction. What does that mean? Even in a special education setting, even when we have children with a documented disability, they are still different. I worked a long time. I was on the board of Autism Speaks that was in Chicago, and I was the policy liaison. And we had this common saying, we were talking to legislators, we would say, if you've met one family that has a child with a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, you've met one family with a child that has a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. Why were we saying that? Because there is no such thing as all children that have a learning disability, all children with a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, all anyone, right? You can't say all women, all teachers, all Republicans, all Democrats. That the all really does not exist. So we need a multi-tiered approach to providing instruction, because not only are our children permeable in their domains of development, their learning styles are different, their interests are different, their characters are different. So we know that we need a multi-tiered approach to providing instruction. But then we got into that underline right there: possible determination of the need to refer the student to determine eligibility for exceptional education services. So there again, we began shifting and thinking about, do they need an IEP? Where's the case manager? Where's the counselor? Oh, this means this is a special ed initiative, right? Because we have to do RTI before we can say that this child needs to be referred for an evaluation. All right. Now, because the federal law was saying that, what did Illinois and other states across the country do? Took that same language and said, okay, we're required by law to do this. And just like our state had to create an Every Student Succeeds Act plan, because No Child Left Behind, which by the way was the reauthorization of the Elementary Secondary Education Act, Since it said that in the law, Illinois obviously adopted that and had to create an RTI plan to be approved by the Department of Education, right? So remember that law said by the 2010-2011 school year, most education initiatives ramp up. And so, but that basically means is the law had to be in place by July 2010-11, but you start preparing for that way down the line, right? So the first step was every state education agency had to submit their RTI plan to the Department of Education. That was supposed to be done with feedback from stakeholders across the state. That went up to the Department of Ed. They either could accept it or reject it in part or whole, okay? If they accepted it as it was, it went back down to the state. The state could then move forward. If they rejected any part of it, then the state had to do another iteration of that plan and send it back up. And that had to continue to happen until the state got an approval of the plan, of the RTI plan that was written within No Child Left Behind. All right. So then as that happened, between 2008 and 2009, this is what was happening all across our state. So right there, if you're like, well, you know what? I didn't begin teaching until way after that. You may not have been the part of districts who were then having to say, and this is literally what happened. The State Board of Education said, this is our approved RTI plan from the Department of Education. Okay, now each district look at our plan and determine how you're going to transition and provide professional learning. Get your districts ready to implement a response to intervention process in your district. So that was between 2008, when those plans were first submitted to the Department of Ed, all the way through 2009. Finally, what was the purpose of that? So that by July 1, 2010, every sitting superintendent had to report back of the State Board of Education and say, we're ready to go. Okay, so that was a lot of professional development. You heard RTI everywhere. You couldn't like walk and hit a stone without somebody saying, I'm going to an RTI training. I'm going to an RTI training, okay? Now, the whole purpose of that was to marry an arranged marriage, I might add, No Child Left Behind, interventions, evaluation procedure, and the tenets of IDEA. So not only did we do it as a state, but districts were trying to say, well, what does this look like? What will it look like? What would it sound like? How will it feel in our district? All to arrange and solidify the marriage between No Child Left Behind and IDEA. As that was happening, though, the winds, as they say, the streets started talking, and we began to hear, wait a second, states are submitting plans to the Department of Ed that are delaying or denying the referral of a child who is suspected of having a disability. Simultaneously, we were hearing that some states were saying, oh, well, then after we do RTI, we'll already know this child has a learning disability. We'll already know that this child has, a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder because we've done RTI. The Council for Exceptional Children in 2008 got wind of this. They actually put out a statement about it, urged the Department of Education to do so at that time. They did not in 2008, but CEC, the Council for Exceptional Children, they are not a government agency, but they're an advocating agency. They were really like sounding that Paul Revere alarm. Wait a minute, we see this is going to be a problem. Let's try to get in front of it. Now in Illinois, we should be proud of the fact that as Illinois was creating its RTI plan in 2009, This statement went out through the Educational Rights and Responsibilities, Understanding Special Education in Illinois. It was a huge book. It talked about every facet that the stakeholders at the State Board of Education could think of, that talked about what families could be concerned about, what teachers needed to know, even had draft letters in there. So in 2009, Illinois said this. All right, and that guiding document. And because it was the State Board of Education, it should have had teeth to it, because they were coming right out and saying, hey, we know we're talking about RTI, but you cannot deny a referral at all based on RTI, and you cannot delay it. Okay. And if, for my people on here who are not special educators, there's a process. It's referral evaluation, then there's a meeting, and then you see that the child meet the criteria for for a diagnosis. You're ruling something in or out. A referral is literally just that. It's someone saying, we're looking at this student's achievement and the opportunity to learn that they've had, and there is a gap. So we want to rule out if there is some type of disability that could be impeding the child's ability to fully learn, and it could be presenting a barrier. It's just a referral, right? So the law was saying if a referral is requested, we must act, all right? So the State Board of Education said that. And then they caught up to us. By 2011, it was so it was permeating so much across the country that the Department of Education sent a Dear Colleague letter out to every single state education agency superintendent and said, this is what we are hearing. It is a problem, and you need to let all of your districts know. Okay? So we had 2008, the Council for Exceptional Children put out a written statement. 2009, as our state was saying, when you're thinking about your RTI plan, know that this is how the state of Illinois is going to function. The Department of OSEP finally put out a Dear Colleague letter in 2011. And then in 2016, they put out a specific letter that related to preschool, pretty much saying the same thing. We are really hearing that this has trickled down to early childhood education and care, and it should be halted. Now, why this is important to us is because as new administrations come in, they look at Dear Colleague letters that are on the books. So as a new presidential administration came in and a new Secretary of Education came in, that 2011 letter, it was looked at, it was not pulled. Same thing with 2016. So what that means is across 3 presidential administrations and secretaries of education, this is still pertinent enough where it is staying on the books. Okay? Everybody okay? Here's why this needed to be halted. Because by default, we started hearing things like, oh, he's an RTI kid. That's an RTI room. They're a tier 1 student, tier 2 student, tier 3 student. The default terminology came from our default understanding about what RTI really should have been. So we struggled the tension between, yeah, but the letter of the law said you must, provide documentation. You must look at how the child is not learning. And then you must talk about intervention. We did that so much that we forgot that the synonym for intervention in this case really is good quality instruction. Are we differentiating? Are we scaffolding? Are we looking at our twice exceptional learners, our students who are operating, our gifted and talented learners? What about our multilingual learners? We got so stuck on intervention that we literally, and Lori, I see Lori shaking her head, had teachers saying to us, well, what am I supposed to do? What's my intervention? And then when we would say, well, talk to me about your instruction, they were like deer in the headlights, almost saying like, well, what does instruction have to do with intervention? So we took away that empowerment by default of teachers to understand, hey, if I'm providing good quality instruction, and for my administrators that are on with us, if I'm supporting my team and my staff to provide good instruction, that means we do ongoing professional learning around differentiating, scaffolding. We do ongoing conversations about the standards, our curriculum. That's the intervention. It's the teacher, it's the instruction, it's those related services personnel. That's the true intervention that we needed. Okay, wonderings, clarifying questions, comments. I love that. Yeah, we could just take out that response to intervention and say really terrific instruction. That was, and really, although the letter of the law said intervention and evaluation, the intent of the law within the rules and regs, it really is exactly what Lori just said. So I'm going to press pause here and see if there are any wonderings, clarifying questions, or comments. And you can either put them in the chat or you can come right off mute. And I'll stop sharing there to see if we need to. I'll do my teacher wait. Tina, we can't, you're breaking up a little bit. Were you coming off mute to ask a question? It does feel like you're trying to say something. I cannot hear it. So if you were, Tina, go ahead and put that in the chat and we will come back to it. So
I
now
have a
let's,
question.
yes.
This is Lily. Is there guidance on MTSS at the pre-K level for multilingual learners?
There is guidance on instruction and resources for children who are multilingual learners. And we're going to put, actually, ECPL just revamped their whole MTSS page. And on that page, there is a resource for educators who are working with children who are multilingual learners, which, and I'm just going to say this, often we use the word multilingual learner because dual language, by default, people often think, oh, do they speak English or Spanish? There's more languages in the world besides English and Spanish. And so multilingual literally means a child who speaks more than one language, that's either in the home language or that of the child. And we do have some resources that are free resources. Again, really terrific instruction means how am I instructing at all of my students at that universal practice, that foundational practice, if they are a multilingual learner. And it also includes children that have an IEP, children that have a 504 plan. If for our Head Start or community-based colleagues that are on, it includes pulling in all of those, like, well, DCFS wants us to do this, Head Start wants us to do that, but we also receiving funding for Preschool for All, and the State Board of Education wants us to do that. Literally, multi-tiered system of supports takes everything and grounds it in the foundation of your practices that you are required to do, and then builds a structure up from there. Okay, I don't see anything else in the chat. There you go, Mary. Yes, yes, yes. Mary, sometimes once Elvis has left the building, is we've been looking for Elvis how long? Okay. And they've told us Elvis left the building for a long time ago. Sometimes once Elvis has left the building or the train has left the station, it's really, really hard to pull it back. And so even now, Lori and I like text each other, I just heard RTI again. I don't know, I'm gonna have to take a vacation behind this. We're still hearing that RTI wording, which I wouldn't even have a problem with that if that RTI wording wasn't still anchored to the RTI default terminology in practice. Okay. And to I guess in defense of those districts that are still using it, oftentimes we find, well, if that's not the truth, then what is? If RTI isn't about that special education process, right? And seeing how students don't respond and how they're not achieving, and you've got to do all this so that you don't have so many children, and really that's where the law No Child Left Behind came from. So many children, and by the way, talking about equity, it was mostly children of color where there's a disproportionate amount of children that were being referred for specialized services. As No Child Left Behind was being created, all of that language was about, hey, maybe we should document a little bit more about what's happening with children before we just say, oh, they have a disability. So the intent behind it, even the letter of the law, was very positive. It's just how the default understanding of how to implement it, which kind of became the culprit. So, of course, when you look at those words, not achieving, intervention, of course, that can help make people get stuck. The problem we're having now, and really why does Cindy Berry, who's the project director of ECPL, want to do this series, is so that we can help people transition from No Child Left Behind. And look at this, Mary, you just gave us a great segue into Every Student Succeeds Act. So Every Student Succeeds Act helped us realize, first thing was in No Child Left Behind, using that scientifically based research with evidence, it really threw people off. What does scientific based mean? And so when ESSA was being created, we learned from that, which is, it's, as you know better, you learn and you do better. Scientific-based research was replaced with evidence-based. So for all of us that say, if I hear the word evidence-based practice or EBP one more time, I might need to drink something stronger than coffee, right? That's all we hear now, EBPs, EBPs. That's because ESSA, it's written into the law. But look how we change from a deficit mindset to an asset-based mindset, leading to and sustaining student outcomes, namely improving student achievement. Present day ESSA, right? So we take this ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, and MTSS, and then we get a broader understanding of really what RTI should have been all along, but certainly it has now graduated to this. And ESSA, again, using the acronym Every Student Succeeds Act, really helped us say, oh, wow, it's about our high-performing students, English language learners. You mean I should have foundational universal practices that include students with disabilities? Yes. Look what else it did. It started helping us intentionally think about what is our cross-curricular alignment and practices between general education, special education, put right in their mental and behavioral health, all of those things. As MTSS grew up and is defined through ESSA, including ongoing professional development. So now we have this all diversity continuum, twice exceptional children who quite literally meet the criteria for specialized services, and gifted and talented in one child. So now we have a broader purpose of MTSS. It truly is whole child, addressing the unique needs and abilities of, I would say, the whole child of every child. Academic, behavioral, social, emotional, cultural. centered around the whole child. And as we just pause right here, when you look at academic, behavioral, social, emotional, cultural, environmental, or wellness, before Lori's going to take us on home, which of these either resonates with you the most or gives you the most concern when you think about this practice centered around the whole child? You can either put it in the chat or just come off mute and share. When we think of matching the unique needs of our students, I say unique needs and abilities. When we think of academic, behavioral, social, emotional, cultural, and that's culturally responsive, environmental wellness, which one kind of bubbles up for you the most, Lily?
I think for me, it's that cultural piece as well as even environmental. I think sometimes teachers are wanting to give as many supports possible to a student. So then it's like, okay, perhaps recommending an evaluation, we're going to guarantee, before the child moves on to kindergarten that they're going to leave with these supports, but they may not necessarily be taking into account, some cultural practices within the home. So I may be seeing that, oh, Lily doesn't just go and put on her coat. She's like waiting for someone to either do it for her or ask her, to do it. Just even those basics of maybe, Lily doesn't know how to use a spoon or a fork, but yeah, that's because at home, she uses a tortilla or, to, kind of as her fork, kind of a thing. So I think that's a big piece as we are getting children from different countries.
And doesn't that speak to the whole child of every child? Just thinking of what, and gosh, Lori and I were talking about this before you all came on. Unfortunately, culturally responsive, because we're very polarized in many factions across our country right now. The phrase culturally responsive has kind of taken on, again, by default, a negative meaning. But all it really means is we're thinking about all of the parts of the child that come to us that could impact their academic needs in the classroom. I'm seeing a lot of you talking about behavior, social, emotional, loving that. Now, if you go back and think of that slide that we had up, you'll notice that we separated out behavioral and social emotional. So many times when we say behavior, social, emotional, we say them as synonyms, but the truth is social emotional development comes from instruction, really terrific instruction, using our standards and curriculum. Because in Illinois, our standards for early childhood, in the Illinois Early Learning and Development Standards, it's explicitly stated, as well as in kindergarten, when our state adopted the Common Core or the new Illinois Learning Standard, we explicitly have information there about social emotional development and learning. So behavior and social emotional are not synonyms, although one impacts the other. Now, why do we say that's important? Is because within your MTSS framework, when you're thinking about behavior, oftentimes you're thinking about the interventions, those things that will halt or decrease the behavior, which is great. But behavior interventions will halt behavior. Instruction changes it. So instruction comes from looking at that behavior, understanding what is the skill or knowledge that this behavior is telling me that this child needs or this student needs. Then I look to my standards and my curriculum to help me teach the child the skill or the knowledge, just like we do with math, language arts, science, or anything else. And Mary, as we shift over to Lori, that's like a great statement to do it. Everything is so intertwined. And it can be concerning, except for Mary, what we want you all to see is that MTSS is that leverage, that it gives you the leverage to lift. right? So I'm not looking at each of these things, and look, I thank you for saying that, because we're not looking at each of these things segregated. We're understanding the whole child also means whole practices. So how do we synthesize these practices so that we are knowing that they are independent, but they're also interrelated and interconnected as well. Thank you all so much. Love these. Keep things coming in the chat, and we're gonna move right along.
Thanks, Antoinette. This group just keeps segueing us on to the next section, and I think that's terrific. I'm loving the conversation in the comments. From my perspective, most of our work is K-12, and so I speak a lot about that part of the spectrum. But very obviously, early childhood is the foundation to all the learning that happens beyond that point, so that what you all do is very, very, very important and very vital. And so I'm glad to see the concepts coming down and see that we're making it not only something that we're doing at the early childhood level, but something that we're doing that's developmentally appropriate at the early childhood level. You're not just imitating what K-12 is doing, but we're doing something that's actually going to really target your kiddos and where they are. And then we work at transitioning that upwards. So in this time that we have left, this is what I'm going to try to cover with you guys, is developing an understanding of the definition of MTSS in Illinois. Maybe you already know it. Talking a little bit more about why bother, because it is some bother to change our mindsets, to change our practices, to do things differently, and then to identify some big ideas that really provide a good rationale and foundation so that we are creating a system of supports for the whole child. The concepts within our current MTSS are not really new. They've been around for a number of years, and it's good to know that implementation research is still ongoing. We've learned a lot about what works and what can work better. So some of the mistakes that we made in Illinois Aspire and Illinois RTI Network, you guys can benefit from now, because we can say, don't do it this way, do it this other way. And it's not just us, it's across the nation. So when we first began, we had triangles that looked a little bit like this right here. So we had the academic side and we had the behavioral side, and started with that academic side and figured out pretty quickly you couldn't just talk about academic success without also addressing behavior. And as we saw that, we began to do things a little bit differently, and that I'm going to back up because my slide is actually a little bit out of order, but then we moved towards this blended model. So we lost some of those really hard definitions between each tier and began to think, okay, we're just going to begin to build a continuum of supports for students so that it's a little more flexible and fluid to give students what they need when they need it, and not get so tied down into what tier of supports they're receiving, as much as really identifying what students need and providing that to them. So as we began to grow at this stage 2, we went from that academic and behavior to broadening that out to social emotional learning. And the pyramid model that you are probably very familiar with is an example of a tiered system of supports focused on social and emotional learning. So most currently, we try to think of an MTSS this way, in that all of the supports that we have within our schools, we take a tiered approach to them and consider it one continuous system from pre-K all the way through graduation, and then a little beyond in some cases. How are we supporting students? How are we leveraging what we have? How are we responding to the needs of the kids that we actually have? Not the kids that we had last year or 5 years ago, but the students that are in our classrooms now, and being real flexible to do that. And that does take some change in the way that we think, and the idea of how we're going to provide supports and when it feels successful to us. So you might be familiar with RTI. We've talked about that a little bit, response to intervention, that model as it's a process of determining eligibility for special education. Antoinette talked about that. So we like to think of RTI as one process within an MTSS. And there are similarities and there are differences between the two. This slide shows you some things that we thought about around RTI. And then as we've grown and developed and decided what it is that is really beneficial to students and called it multi-tiered system of supports, you see there's a lot more words around instruction on the right-hand side. We're really trying to emphasize, as Antoinette did earlier, that it is just really good instruction that becomes more and more individualized and tailored the farther we go along that continuum. So it's sort of like taking that problem-solving process and putting it towards the work of determining eligibility, or beginning the process of determining eligibility. So when we get to the end, if there is an end, when we've individualized interventions and instructions for students that are receiving tier 3 supports, we have a pretty good idea of what works for that student. That's how I like to think about it. It's not a replacement for eligibility determination, but by the time we get to that point, we can bring you a whole bunch of stuff that says this is what helps this student to be successful. We just can't do it in the general education environment alone. We need also the supports from special education. So here is the definition of MTSS in Illinois. So MTSS is a framework for continuous improvement that's systemic, prevention-focused, and data-informed, providing a coherent continuum of supports responsive to meet the needs of all learners. So using an MTSS allows schools to develop and maintain a continuum support for students, and as Antoinette mentioned, for staff also, because that's very important. And that approach brings together then within a district all of the individual schools to coordinate their supports so that the students, even who move from the primary to the elementary to the middle school to the high school, have a very consistent experience in terms of their support. MTSS isn't a program that's just in isolation. In fact, it isn't a program at all. It's designed to be a really proactive approach to identifying and meeting students' needs and staff's needs by using data to inform our decision-making at all levels. So that we want a framework, want to end up with a framework for continuous improvement. So not only are we focused on instruction for students, but also stepping back to say, how is our system working? Is it working for some students? Is it working for all students? And how can we identify barriers that still exist and go ahead and remove those for students? So what I'd like for you to do now is I'll go back to that slide in just a second, but I'd like for you to think about the words in that definition that stand out to you as most important. So if you would add the words that stand out to you to chat, and then just take a couple seconds to read one or two other chats so you can see what your colleagues on this call also see as most important. And then when you're done, if you can find the toolbar and want to use the thumbs up, that'd be great. If you just want to put, okay, you're done and ready to move on, I'm going to go back to the definition and let you take a look at it again. So what stands out to you? Pay no attention to my colored words. They were just my important words. What are your important words? And Antoinette, I think that this definition is also included in the special education guidance document. So the state is actually using it too. Data-informed, responsive, prevention, all learners, continuous improvement, continuum, prevention-focused, systemic, continuum, data-informed, continuous. Okay, those are fantastic answers. Flexible, yes, thank you. All learners. Prevention. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I think we want to remember that MTSS is not a particular regular education program. It's not a special education program. It's not a curriculum. It's not a set of materials. It's not a hoop to jump through. It's not a box. It's not one size fits all. It's an every education initiative where we align our effort towards the same goal. It's a framework that relies on us to possess a growth mindset, to support our students to have a growth mindset, and then create a sense of collective efficacy and embrace that idea of continuous improvement. So MTSS is our journey. This is where we're going and evolving and always continuously improving. It's not a destination we get to, laminate it and put it into practice. Several of you mentioned that all stood out to you in the definition of MTSS, and this slide and this information reminds us that serving all students is our legal responsibility. So Antoinette kind of built that in her part, talking about the iterations of IDEA and now in ESSA. This is our charge as educators. And one of the really key ways to reach these big, lofty goals is to approach our work in an integrated, efficient, evidence-based fashion. And this is where we'll be thinking and planning and acting in ways that support the whole child, not just for academics, not just for social emotional growth, but making students sure they have all the skill sets they need to be able to operate successfully from my perspective, upon graduation. What do they need to be a success in their community and their life? So MTSS is also a framework that helps us to address equity because it incorporates best practices. It uses data to inform our decision-making, and it helps us to change and align our adult practices so that we're more consistent in how we respond and support our students each and every day. I have a short video I want to share. It's an old one, so I apologize for the quality of it, but it communicates one of the big reasons for using an MTSS. Like I said, it takes work, it takes change, it takes us to do things differently as adults, but it's really worth it, and I'm going to show you why. So that's an old video for sure, but as educators, we're all working hard. You know, we're out there scraping the snow off the car each and every day, falling down, slipping, our hands are freezing. But using an MTSS framework can help us to organize so that at least all the effort that we're putting out ends up scraping the snow off the right car. That's what we want to do. So we're going to try to think about it that way as we expend effort. We're also focusing our effort to really make a change in the places where we need to make a change. And that effort is we're working smarter, not harder. So an equitable MTSS system of supports, when used wisely and well, and adapting it to our context and our staff and our students, can support us in organizing all of our resources, including staff and expertise, our policies and our practices to successfully support each learner. So that's one of the big ideas and reasons really for doing it. So I think it's funny that Dr. Taylor and I have the same slide, so we're really in a mind meld here. But you might consider that one of the big takeaways from today that I hope you walk away with is that the structures that we place in our schools and in our classrooms can do one of two things. They can either help or they can hinder students' success. So when we use an MTSS framework, we aim to address students' needs by integrating supports across the areas that you see on the left of this slide. And you all had different ones that you were most concerned about. So integrating is key, and having practices and policies that really facilitate learning. So sometimes that means taking a look at what's not working and taking that off our plate and throwing that away and adopting something that does work. And it might used to work. It might used to work well. It's just that it doesn't work with the students that we now have. And some of you have pointed out the differences in students, especially our younger learners post-COVID, and some of the challenges that our students and our staff have. We want to be, using an MTSS really causes us to believe that all students can learn if we create and support the learning environment that includes all of those areas on the left. If we're thinking about all those things and integrating all of those things, we can support our learners. We want to think about those, obviously academics, behavior, social, emotional, cultural, environment, wellness are separate things, but they also work in concert. And several of you have already said that. It's hard to tease those out and just make them individual things. So really trying to integrate is key. And because those things impact, so a student who's struggling in academics may choose to act out. A student who doesn't have good self-regulation may fall behind in academics, and so on and so forth. So really thinking about the whole child. So I want to talk about some of the 3 big ideas that are part of using an MTSS effectively. One is taking that systems approach or systems mindset. So focusing on the parts of the system like instruction, intervention, professional learning, coaching, and policy that are going to really support the effective use of the system. They're going to support sustainability. That's really important. And the ability for us to be flexible, to modify practices over time as needs change. MTSS has been proven, there's research by Hattie and others, to be highly effective when it's used as a systemic framework with fidelity. So to get to fidelity, we need to consider what we need as teachers, as educators. What do we need? What resources do we need? What professional development do we need? What coaching is needed? And then we need to identify what students are thriving in our current system and what students or student groups tend to historically struggle. And since we can identify that, we can adapt our system to serve all learners by changing some of the things that impact those students. It's really important to remember that the success of an MTSS rests on that systemic approach. So unifying general education, special education, and deliberate and intentional ongoing collaboration. We're all collaborating around the table. Our students are multifaceted, they have multifaceted needs, and it's more than just one teacher in one classroom can do. We need to pull together, and it truly does take a village in this day and age to meet the needs of our students and to bring our collective strengths together to support those students alongside their strengths. Second big idea, often educators, we hear, we spend too much time just putting out fires. That's all I do is put out fires all day. That reactive model creates situations where you're just always reacting and you're behind the 8 ball, so to speak, and trying to correct negative circumstances after they happen. A prevention focus shifts our thinking from putting out fires to trying to prevent them in the first place. If anyone's old enough to remember Smokey the Bear, only you can prevent forest fires. That, for example, like a prevention paradigm or mindset or model, you're going to create policies and practices using your data that support and increase positive outcomes by preventing some of those negative outcomes from the get-go. Just like with medicine, we're going to use some preventative approaches. And prevention applies across all of the tiers. It really helps us to identify who needs support. It's about identifying who needs support as early as possible. We're not waiting to fail. We're going to implement supports as soon as we can. And we're going to then look at what we're providing to students and say, is it working? And if it isn't, we're going to make another change. We're going to intensify the instruction, or we're going to tailor it a little bit more to that student's need. So the preventative focus of an MTSS helps us to prevent development of new problems. It's going to help reduce the number of challenges we have, the number of fires we have to put out, And ultimately, it should reduce the intensity and complexity of needing supports. So as you know, the farther along that continuum we work from tier 1 to tier 3, the more intense the resources are that it takes to provide support at each of those levels. So being proactive and preventative really helps us to make good use out of our resources, scraping the snow off the right car. The third big idea in an MTSS is the use of data to make decisions. So relying a little bit less on our professional judgment, not negating it entirely, but less on only our professional judgment or intuition, and more on collecting data to show us what is needed and for whom. So in an MTSS, we know we need to use and we need to be able to trust our data to make important educational decisions. So it's really important that staff understand how to interpret data well, and to know what those data show and what they don't show. Equitable decision-making requires that we rely on the use of multiple measures of data to get multiple perspectives on student learning and growth. So schools need to provide that staff professional learning opportunities. They need to provide clear guidelines for using data really well at every level of decision-making. So in my situation, K-12, we're talking about at the district, at the school level, at the grade level, and at the classroom level. And that is reflected in the levels that you have as well. And then we don't need to be afraid of using data. We do it all the time, and that dreaded scale is on there, and that's data that I don't like, but there it is. Whether we're referencing the steps on our watches or the weather forecast or following sports stats to be really up on our latest sports teams, we look at data all the time. It's just having the knowledge to use it well is what's really important. So in schools, we collect demographic data. You have attendance data, you have formative, hopefully, and summative assessment data. You have observation data. In upper grades, we have tests and quizzes and grades and credits earned. So in an MTSS, we're collecting screening or benchmark data on all students so that we can identify who needs something more. When students are receiving more intense instruction or intervention, we're using progress monitoring. We're collecting progress monitoring data to know whether what we're providing is working well. And then sometimes we do some diagnostic assessment to see if we can find out a little bit more about what that student might need. But the idea of pulling all of those things together to adapt instruction to be a better fit for our students. We might also want to have some data that shows us how well our entire system is working for all of our students. And then to break that data down by subgroups. Is it working for every subgroup of students? How is what we're providing working for those students who have IEPs? Are they all showing really good growth? Or is that a group that maybe we need to reset in some way? And then really important, of course, all this data needs to be housed in a data system. Because if you're going to use it, it's going to need to be accessible to you. Another thought, though, too, with using multiple measures of data would be to get some way to have some perception data. What do your staff feel about how things are working? If you have students old enough to tell you, what do students feel about how the interventions or instruction are working for them? What are the parents feeling about how well school is going? So getting some perception data from other perspectives can help us to identify what we might want to put on that continuous improvement list. And then that data display, if we can have data pulled together in a way that's really simple and usually graphic, like graphs or charts, so that we can share it. We can share it with each other as teachers. We can share it administrators to teachers. We can share it with families and caregivers as well. And they can have a greater understanding of how their student is doing. So that was a lot. So I want to turn to all of you and first see if you would share in chat, or you could come off mute if you'd like. What is at least one aha you have from our time today? And if you'd like to ask a question, certainly can do that too. So let's start with anything you want to add to chat, either an aha or a question that you might still have for Antoinette or for myself. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that it's almost 5:20 and you guys have been on the clock since early this morning, all of you. So oh, I'm sorry, Mary. Thank you for these ahas. These are good. Differences between RTI and MTSS. Yep. Ongoing collaboration. Yeah, that's really important. And I didn't mention our English language learners much and all of that, but that certainly is a high priority for us. Yeah, the clarification of RTI and MTSS. I think I need to hire a skywriter and they could just put that in the sky all over the place. Charts explaining MTSS. Yeah. And this is just the, 1-inch overview, and we'll get into more in the next sessions in this series, a little more detail. And since we've heard from you, I'm thinking, Antoinette, some things that they mentioned today, we can be sure to include. Good reminders, basic concepts, a little history on MTSS was implemented. Yeah, it's good. Thank you, guys. And then the next slide is, what questions might you have? On something that you saw so far today, or something we didn't touch on, and we could be sure to include that as we develop for November session. But needs a little think time, and then they need a couple more seconds to actually type. Oh, thanks, Antoinette. That's good.
Because we definitely want to let you all know that in our earlier today, we talked about what the state board put in writing in 2009. I really think it's important for us to know that as the state, as Every Student Succeeds Act was implemented and the state was creating its ESSA plan, and we realized that, we've grown up now, RTI, oh, you were so cute. Look at you, you're a teenager, you're all grown up. The state responded to that. So there is, and I just put that in there, the Illinois State Board of Education updated its educational rights and responsibilities and changed out all of the language about RTI to make it MTSS specific. And so, if you're thinking like, oh gosh, I might have to go back and have some conversations with some folks to help shift the mindset. This is what the State Board of Education is saying. So we put that link right in there for you all. And I know that some of you were still typing if you had any questions. So Sandra, not so much specifically speech or OT. I can tell you that you heard Lori talking about data a lot. And so earlier we were saying data can inform. So oftentimes when we hear the conversation, we tried MTSS and it didn't work. Sometimes moving too fast and too broad too quickly is the thing that make it feel like MTSS didn't work. So I don't specifically have any information about districts that specifically piloted speech or OT, but I do know of districts. I cannot say their names. As a consultant, I have to protect the confidentiality of districts I consult with, but I have several districts that I've consulted with that looked at their data and said, okay, we're going to roll out multi-tiered system of supports. We're going to pilot it either across a district or across certain grade levels, or sometimes they break it down to certain classrooms, focusing on one specific thing that their data showed them. It could be chronic absenteeism. It could be referrals for suspension out of, in the office referrals for suspension and expulsion. It could be, look what's happening with our language arts, based off of our NWEA data. And so they pilot it there. That doesn't mean that that's the only thing that they look at, but it means that specifically they say, okay, this is going to be our primary, as we're exploring and installing, we're going to look there. And then what I've seen happen is it broadens out to practices across their entire districts. Marie is saying how MTSS, is that a question, how it supports students who are struggling in school, or is that like an aha, Marie? Oh, Lori was saying it's got the same question there.
Antoinette, Tina has her hand up too. I didn't know if you could see that.
Tina, come on up. And I might just say, I love your pillow. So yes, Tina,
Yeah.
come on up.
I just wanted to share out that we have in Livingston County, we have been doing some speech RTI. Sorry, I have people coming home in my house at the moment. Let me relocate. We have been doing speech RTI, and it has been extremely beneficial for meeting some of our students' needs, especially the ones in, say, like kindergarten and in that age where we can go in and be a center and intervene with children who have like areas, and then seeing, are they able to reproduce those sounds? Are they able to, they're those questionable kids that we're like, yeah, do we pick them up and assess them? We might only need to do about 3 to 6 months of speech services and that. So that has been something that we have worked with, and we've really been interested in utilizing more of an OT type of model too, especially in our preschools, because we're really finding, coming out of COVID, our students' motor skills are so significantly delayed, even on our students that have no concerns, like their academic readiness skills are developmentally appropriate, their social emotional skills are developmentally appropriate. But if you put a pencil, a crayon, a pair of scissors in front of them, it's like a foreign object, and they just really don't know what to do with them. So we've really been working on that, because we don't have enough OTs to go around down the road to give them that support. So we've really been working on how can we incorporate them into that play-based center time with our kids in our preschool programs.
And I thank you for sharing that, Tina, because that's prevention focused. Because if that's, it's not only prevention focused, but it's so smart not to get stuck in that. But they don't have an IEP. They're not supposed to be getting these, fine occupational therapy skills. Fine motor is not specific to students with a disability. If they have an IEP for OT, that means that despite what we have done in implementing universal foundational practices, we still are seeing children that either mechanically, like they're physically unable, or something, from that cognitive process transferring itself to the brain and the hand is not working. That's for the child who we ultimately would say, we've done all of these things, we've looked at the referral, we've ruled in that they do need this support in the means of it having an IEP. But the law, as Lori said, ESSA requires us to provide this type of instruction for all students. So taking that frame, that taking yourself out of the box, I like to say taking yourself out of the triangle, which I might say has been a bully for quite some time, right? That triangle has been bullying us, expanding those thoughts. That really is what tiered support means in whomever needs it in any way, shape, or form. So I really thank you for sharing that. And then as we go on, yes, the triangle has been bullying us, but we also know that there's some districts where there's like, that red, green, and yellow, or green, yellow, and red, it's what they learned. It's easy. You've got those cut scores. If a student is here to here, they're an RTI kid. There is a place for RTI within an MTSS framework. And we're going to get to that in November as we start looking at those evidence-based process for selecting evidence-based practices through the and are they universal? Are they for targeted, for individualized? But just like your NCPMI, your social emotional, if you're using Castle or Second Step or Calm Classroom, your RTI would go in your foundational practices, right? Because that's where we want everyone to know, hey, when we look at our kids' readiness assessment, if we see students that fall within here, then immediately we're going to put small group, we're going to put one-on-one practices, we're going to create supports for our instructors to be able to deal with that. That's kind of that cutness of RTI. This is not saying throw it out the window and let the, throw it under the bus, so to speak. It's just saying it is not a holistic framework of segregating and synthesizing evidence-based practices. Ooh, look at that. We're right at 5:30. Lori has, you see, she's talked about November coming up. Get ready to work, because this was just giving us that foundation, everyone. Now that we have that understanding to kind of help us with our mindset, we're going to go deeper, and we're going to go deeper, and we're going to go broader at the same time. And so we do hope that we can see you or some of your colleagues on November 15th, January 18th, and February 7th. And we also want to let you know, as you look at this next slide, that we are very aware that we need to have some specific conversations about trauma-informed practices. We are going to do that through an asset-based trauma-informed, evidence-based practice lens within an MTSS framework, and those will be coming up at the end of February and the first part of March. I promise to put that website in there for the MTSS. And when you go on that website, you can pull that right out. You will see under special populations, you will see one link that says students with disabilities, and then you'll see another one that says students with who are multilingual learners. When you click that link, it'll take you automatically to multilingual learner resources. Ooh, 1 minute over. Those of you that hung with us, thank you. We're going to turn you over to Karen.